Okay, so Parshas Vayechi, um, really, this is when you reflect on Parshas Vayechi, or at least when I reflect at the end of Sefer Bereshis, we really make a massive transition from Sefer Bereshis till Sefer Shmos, from Sefer Bereshis to Sefer Shmos, in the sense that Sefer Bereshis is really the story of a family, and Shmos begins the story of a nation. Sefer Bereshis is really the story of Avraham Avinu's family, his children, his grandchildren, his great grandchildren. And then in Sefer Shmos, we really transition more from, we're no longer focused on the family of Avraham Avinu. Now it's the nation of Klal Yisrael. And so I always look at Parshas Vayechi as sort of the bridge between how we get from becoming a Jewish family to becoming a Jewish nation. And I think that's really what the message, sort of the underlying message of Parshas Vayechi is how do we transform from a family to a nation? What empowers us as a nation? What is our strength as a nation? How do we become a nation? And I think those messages are embedded in Parshas Vayechi. And really, if you take a look, take a step back from Parshas Vayechi for a second, and we'll rejoin Parshas Vayechi, but let's take, yes, I recorded on the computer and everything. So, but let's take a look. Let's zoom out and sort of take a look at the whole Sefer Bereshis. And I think, I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but if you take a look at the entire Sefer Bereshis, there's a pattern from the beginning, from literally Parshas Bereshis all the way to the end, Parshas Vayechi. And the pattern is a pattern of behavior, behavior from siblings, how siblings behave and how they get along. And it's a fascinating sort of, I don't know, maybe pattern is the wrong word, but maybe evolution is the right word. Let's take a look, just superficially. Take a look at the sets of siblings that the Torah focuses on from Bereshis to Vayechi. So let's start with the very first, Cain and Hevel, right? So Cain and Hevel, not only do they not get along, but the relationship ends up in murder, where one brother murders another. Right, it's an extreme of not getting along. This is as extreme as the relationship could possibly get, where one brother murders another brother. And then you go to the next set of siblings, which is Bnei Noach, the children of Noach, where Canaan is banished. Right, the one of the brothers, Canaan, is behaves in a manner that is not befitting the family, the other brothers, and he's cursed and he's banished forever. And then you go to the next set of siblings that the Torah focuses on, which is Yitzchak and Yishmael. And Yitzchak and Yishmael also don't get along. And Yishmael's also banished. But the Torah hints at a reconciliation at some level. It doesn't say it explicitly, but by Avram Avinu's burial, Yitzchak goes first. It's almost as if Yishmael, when they list the children in the burial, Yitzchak is listed first. It's almost as if Yishmael acquiesces to Yitzchak's position. And Rashi tells us this is a sign that Yishmael did tshuva. There's some level of reconciliation, not overtly mentioned, but sort of alluded to. So again, it's fascinating. It's almost like stages of growth. First murder, then banishment with a hint of reconciliation, and then we go to the next generation. The next generation of siblings is Yaakov and Esau. And again, they don't get along. And again, there's a separation or a banishment or whatever you want to call it. They're separated. They cannot live together. But they do reconcile. And the Torah speaks about that reconciliation and that coming together, where they are able to put aside their differences, they embrace each other, they kiss each other, they come back together again, but still they don't ever live with each other, they don't ever dwell together again, They haven't reconciled to the point where they're able to put aside their grudges. They're able to embrace. This is a new stage of development, but they never live together. And then we go to the next generation, with Yosef and the Shvatim. Again, the brothers don't get along. But here, thank you. But here, they not only do they eventually reconcile, but they all sort of live together in Mitzrayim. So it's almost again a further development. And then we go to the next generation, the final generation, the generation of Ephraim and Manasseh, Shalom, peace, no enmity, no hatred, no sinas chinam. The brothers get along peacefully. And it's fascinating. There's a real, when you zoom out, it's obvious there's a message that the Torah is giving us here. The sort of the evolutionary stages of creating a nation. And it's almost as if the Torah is telling us, oops, I don't know why it's not get in. It's not on my end. It says joining. It's not on my end. There's nothing I could do. It says joining. It's almost as if the Torah is telling us that this is the prerequisite to becoming a nation, is family unity, family achdus. And it takes many generations to be able to refine the family to such an extent where they're not only able to reconcile, to get along, but they're able to lichatchila live in peace. And that's Ephraim and Manasseh. And perhaps that's the reason, that's the answer to the famous question that we always ask, that why when we bless our sons on Erev Yom Kippur, some people have the minute to do it every Erev Shabbos, we say Yisimcha Elokim K'Ephraim and Manasseh. Our girls we bless Yisimcha Elokim K'Sar Rivka Rachel V'Leah. So it would be obvious the proper, but I've spoken about this before, that it would seemingly the parallel blessing, the parallel bracha to the boys would be Yisimcha Elokim K'Avram Yitzchak V'Yaakov. Just like we say by the girls, Sarah Rivka Rachel V'Leah. But we don't bless our children to be, our sons to be like the Avos. Even though the Avos are our great tzaddikim and our Avos, Hein Amarkava, they were chariots of the divine will, but there is something unique about the relationship of Ephraim and Manasseh, and a lot of Meforshim speak about this and give lots of reasons why we bless our sons, Yisimcha Elokim K'Ephraim and Manasseh. But maybe this is exactly it. This is what we're blessing our sons with, because what's the greatest joy, the greatest nachas for a parent is when their children get along. Yisimcha Elokim K'Ephraim and Manasseh, that l'chadchila there should be no enmity. L'chadchila, even though they were very different, even though they had different unique personalities, they had different drachim and avodas Hashem, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim was more worldly, Rashi says. He was the translator. Manasseh was more connected to his father. They were different, but they always got along. Fascinating, the evolutionary stages. Okay, so now let's bring it directly to Parshas Vayechi. Let me see if I can get that person in again. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to share my screen because I just want to share two psukim and a Rashi with you. So those who are on the Zoom, I'm going to share my screen with you. I want to go to the very end of the parsha, and then I want to jump back to the beginning of the parsha in a moment. But I want to go begin this year with the end of the parsha, and that is the funeral of Yaakov Avinu, the death of Yaakov Avinu. As we know, Yaakov Avinu dies in this parsha, and the brothers take him as he swore. Yosef gave Yosef an oath to swear that he would be buried in Mitzrayim. He did not want to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. He did not want to be buried in Mitzrayim. And so they take him from Mitzrayim to Maras HaMachpelah. And on the way, the Torah gives us a fascinating two psukim about an event that happens on the way to Maras HaMachpelah. And this is why I want to share the screen with you. Let's see this person. Okay, I'm going to share the screen with you just so I can do these psukim inside. And for those who are here in person, I'll just read them out loud. So take a look in Pasuk Yud. So Pasuk Yud tells us the Yavai ad Goren ha'atod. they come to this place called Goren Ha'atad on their way to Marasa Machpelah. What is Goren Ha'atad? Goren is a threshing floor that's where they would thresh wheat or whatever it may be, a grain, and Atad is thorn bushes. So it literally means the threshing place of the thorn bushes. Asher Be'evar HaYarden, and the Torah tells us where this is located. It's located on the other side of the Yarden. V'yispedu Sham Gadol, and there they make these hespedim, these eulogies for Yaakov Avinu. They stop there, and they make these eulogies. The Yasla of Evil Shivas Yamim, and they have a shiva there. They have some type of shiva there, where they were mourning there for 7 days in this Goren Ha'atud. And what's interesting is, look at the next pasuk Yud Aleph. Vayar Yeshiv Haaretz Haknani es Evil B'Goren Ha'atud. The Canaanim, who are the dwellers, the inhabitants of the land there, they notice what's going on in Goren Ha'atud. Vayemru, and they're affected by it. They say, Ava Eva Kavod Zeh LeMitzrayim. There's a heavy mourning for Egypt, and therefore they called that place Evel Mitzrayim, the mourning of Egypt, Asher Be'ever Yarden. But again, it mentions this Goren Ha'atad. This place is mentioned in the very next pasuk, Goren Ha'atad. Now, those psukim seem completely superfluous. That's it. Then the story goes on to continue the story of the burial of Yaakov Avinu. Nothing happens seemingly in Goren Ha'atad. Nothing remarkable happens there. They stop there. They make a shiva for Yaakov Avinu there. They give hespedim there. The Canaanim notice it. Why is the Torah telling us this? The Torah doesn't just tell us things without a reason. I'm sure there's lots of events that happen as they travel from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael, to Maras HaMachpelah. I'm sure lots of things happen. I'm sure there were lots of events that happened, but the Torah doesn't mention every one of them. The fact that the Torah mentions that they stopped in Goren Ha'atad, and it mentions Goren Ha'atad twice in the next pasuk as well. And it tells us the story how the Canaanim came out to see what is the Torah trying to teach us. Because the Torah is not just recalling events. Everything in Torah is teaching us something. But what is it teaching us? And what is this strange Goren Ha'atad? So there's a fascinating behind the scenes of what happened in Goren Ha'atad. And Rashi actually brings it, and it's from a Gemara Masechta Sota. And the Gemara says there's a reason why the Torah is telling us. The name Goren Ha'atad is a remez to the event that happened in that place. And that's why it's called Goren Ha'atad. It's called Goren Ha'atad. It probably wasn't called Goren Ha'atad at the time they stopped there, but this event that took place sort of renamed the town. What happened there in Goren Ha'atad? Why is it so relevant to us? Because just the overt reading of the Torah, it seems like nothing happened there other than they made some hespedim there, they made eulogies there, then they moved on. But the Torah is recording it, so obviously something happened there. So the Gemara tells us, yes, there was something quite significant that happened there. And Rashi quotes it, which is why I have the Rashi open on my screen. So Rashi says, so the name Goren Ha'atad, Rashi says, seemingly the simple explanation of that name is that in order to protect the threshing floor, the grain on the threshing floor, they surrounded that place, they surrounded that floor with thorn bushes. And that's why it's called Goren Ha'atad. That's the simple explanation. It's called Goren Ha'atad because in that place, there was a threshing floor that was surrounded by thorn bushes that protected the threshing floor, so people wouldn't just walk over the grain. Okay. But Rashi says there's a deeper explanation, a much deeper explanation. And the deeper explanation is as follows. Rabbi Seinu Darshu, says Rashi, our rabbis teach us in Masechta Sota Daf Yud Gimel, Al Shem HaMa'ora. That name, Goren Ha'atad, was called that based on the event that took place there during this burial of Yaakov Avinu. What happened? What was the event? So the Rashi continues. The Gemara explains, Shabo Kal Malachi Canaan v'Nesiya Yishmael l'Milchama. That the Canaanim and the Yishmaelim came to fight Klal Yisrael there. They didn't just come to watch the Avelis like the Torah says. They came for battle. They came to battle this little Jewish family. The Kevin Sharo Kisrei Shel Yosef Talui Ba'Reinu Shel Yaakov. But when they saw the crown of Yosef placed on his father's coffin, somehow that switched their mindset. And instead of battling, Amdu Kulan v'talu by Kisrehem, all of them, the kings of Canaan and the kings of Ishmael, all came and placed their crowns on the coffin as well. V'hikifu kisarim kaberin hamukaf sayag shalpetzim. And Yaakov's coffin appeared like a threshing floor because the crowns had points on them. So it appeared like a threshing floor surrounded by thorns. The point of the crowns were like thorns. And so that's why it's called Gorana Atzad, because Yaakov Avinu's coffin was surrounded by these crowns. They all came, when they saw Yosef's crown, they all came to put their crowns there. And Yaakov's coffin was surrounded by crowns from the Malachi Canaan and the Malachi Ishmael and Yosef's crowns. And the points of the crown look like thorns. And so it's called Gorana Atzad because of what happened with Yaakov's coffin. Fascinating. But why? What exactly happened there? What was the story? Why did they come to battle? And instead of battling like they came to battle this Jewish family, they were so deeply moved by Yosef's crown on the coffin that they, instead of battling, put their crowns on his coffin as well. What is the Torah intimating to us? What's going on there? So I think the explanation is as follows. That look who came, the Malachi Canaan and the Malachi Ishmael. These were two people who were banished from the Jewish family. I mean, Canaan was banished when they were still before they were pre-Jewish. The Canaan was banished from Noah. As we said, Canaan was Noah's sons, was one of Noah's sons, and he was banished in the times of Noah. And Ishmael, we know, was banished. So they held, both Canaan and Ishmael held tremendous grudges against the Jewish people that they were banished, that they were not a part of this nation. And now this Jewish nation, this little tiny Jewish nation, this little Jewish family that they were banished from is incredibly vulnerable. They're traveling. They're not stationed. They're not settled. Their patriarch died. They're in mourning. Now is the perfect time to attack. Now is the perfect time to get their revenge, to quench their anger from being banished from this family. Something happened. They saw the crown of Yosef on the coffin. And that flipped a switch within them. Why? Because Yosef was also banished. Yosef was brutally banished from this family. Banished, tormented, tortured. And yet, with everything that Yosef went through, with all the banishment and the anguish that Yosef went through, he took his crown. His crown represents his power, his strength, his gevura. Yosef took his crown, took his power, and placed it, surrendered it to the coffin of his father. Meaning that it was a symbolic action. That he was utilizing his power not to fight the family that banished him, not to hold on to their anger and the resentment of the family that banished him, that tormented him. A well-deserved anger and resentment, perhaps. Nobody would even argue that. And yet he took his power, he took his crown, and surrendered it to the coffin of his father, symbolizing that he utilized his power to pardon, to forgive, to unify the family, instead of battling the family, instead of fighting the family. So when the Malachi Canaan and the Malachi Ishmael saw this, that Yosef, who was also brutally banished, utilized his power and his strength not to fight this family, but to unify this family, to come together with this family, to surrender to this family, to become one with this family, to forgive this family, to unify this family. They did the same as well. And that's what the Torah is intimating to us. That's why it's called Goran Ha'ata. The at when this story ends, and they bury Yaakov Avinu, and they come back to Mitzrayim, something else happens there. The brothers then come to Yosef, and they're worried now that now Yosef, they still are not convinced. And now they're worried that after Yaakov is buried and after the Avelis is over, Yosef's going to take their revenge. And they come to Yosef and they say, don't kill us. Don't take revenge on us. And Yosef answers, Tachas Elokim Anochi, am I in the place of God? Right? It's the very next story in the Parsha. And the simple, what does it mean? Tachas Elokim Anochi, am I in the place of God? And what's fascinating, I mean, Rashi says, what does it mean? Am I in the place of God? Meaning to say, even if I want to harm you, only God decides who gets harmed and who doesn't get harmed. It's not up to me. It's up to God. Just like you intended to harm me, but God meant it for the good, and I wasn't harmed, and I was brought to becoming the viceroy of Egypt, of Mitzrayim. So that's a simple shot when Yosef says, "Atachas Elokim Anochi, I in place of God," meaning that I may want to harm you, but if God doesn't allow it, I can't do anything. It's God who's in control. But what's fascinating is that the Targum Onkelos, who translates the Torah into Aramaic, he was like the original art scroll in the times when the spoken language was Aramaic, and he translates the Torah in Aramaic, but he doesn't just translate it word for word like a good art scroll or a good English translation. He translates it with explanation so we understand what the Torah is saying, and he translates that completely differently. Hatachas Elokim Ani, he translates totally separately, totally differently than that. Not am I in the place of God, but he translates it Ana dechala da Hashem. No, Ari dechala da Hashem Ana. He translates in Aramaic, I am a Yiras Hashem. Would I ever harm you? I'm a Yiras Hashem. Are dechala da Hashem Ana. I am a Yiras Hashem. And the question is, why does he translate Tachas Elokim as Yiras Hashem? And there's a fascinating Kedushas Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, that explains the Targum Onkelos and what Yosef is really saying. And what Yosef is really saying to the Shvatim is as follows. There's one of two paths that a person can take in life. A person can try to emulate our Creator, which is the path that we're meant to take, to connect myself, to be davuk to Hashem, to connect myself to Hashem. And how do we connect ourselves to Hashem? By emulating Hashem's midas. And therefore, even though I may have reason to be resentful, and I may have reason to be angry, but for a family member that's coming to me and apologizing to me and trying to reconcile with me and feels terribly for what they've done, connecting myself to Hashem's midas means just as Hashem has compassion and just as Hashem forgives, I forgive as well. Now, again, I don't want to get this wrong here, and I don't want to give the wrong message. If somebody's not asking for forgiveness, if somebody's engaged in very negative, hurtful, harmful, narcissistic behavior, addiction issues, whatever it is, that's a separate category. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when somebody asks for forgiveness, recognizes what they've done. Do we find it within ourselves to give that forgiveness? And this is what Yosef is saying. I am davuk to Hashem. I am a Yiras Elokim. I have Yiras Hashem. If one doesn't have Yiras Hashem, if one's not connected to Hashem, then one holds on to their resentments. That's called Tachas Elokim, underneath Hashem. Not davuk to Hashem, but Tachas Elokim, underneath Hashem. And this is what Yosef is saying. Am I underneath Hashem? No, I'm davuk to Hashem. Of course I forgive you. That's what Targum Onkelos is saying. That's the message of this whole conversation. That if we want to be connected to Hashem, we have to emulate His midas. Emulating His midas means have compassion and forgiveness and pardon and unify together with your family. That's That's davuk to Hashem. That's Yiras Hashem. That's connected to Hashem. That's the message here. So both these last stories of the Parsha, the story of Goran Ha'atad and the story of the brothers coming to Yosef and asking for forgiveness, have the same underlying theme. That Yosef utilized all of his power that he had built up to unify and come together with the family. And this is what makes the family a nation. There's a reason why in Parshas Bamidbar, when Klal Yisrael is counted, the census in Parshas Bamidbar, and although there's spiritual reasons for that census, as Rashi says, Hashem counts us so much because he loves us so much, like a person counting diamonds, that's how Hashem loves us. But on a practical level, the census in Parshas Bamidbar was to figure out the numbers of soldiers between the ages of 20 and 60, because they're going to engage in Milchamas Midyan, the battle of Sichon and Og. There's various battles in the Midbar that they're going to have to physically battle. Now Hashem is with them and Hashem is going to help them, and there's no question, but they are still going to have to engage in the physical battle, and so they have to know how many soldiers they have. That's the simple reason for the census. And yet, that census is constantly counted. When we count the numbers, they're counted lemishpachesam, lebeis avesam. They're counted by their families, by the beis avesam, by their fathers' homes. In other words, the Torah is giving us a very powerful message. The strength of Klal Yisrael is commensurate to the strength of lemishpachesam, lebeis avesam, the strength of our families. The strength of our family unit has a direct effect and a direct correlation to the spiritual and physical strength of Klal Yisrael as a whole, as a nation. And this is exactly what the message is at the end of Sefer Bereshis. And this is really the whole Seder Ishtashus of the brothers, of the relation, the relationship of siblings from Bereshis to Vayechi, until we get to Ephraim and Menashe. Now let's jump to the beginning of the Parsha, where you have the bracha of Ephraim and Menashe, where Yaakov gives them a bracha. And we have the very famous, Yosef brings them to Yaakov before Yaakov dies, because he sees that his father is sick, his father is dying. He brings his two sons, Ephraim and Menashe, one of the most famous stories in all of Tanakh. And of course, Menashe is the Bechor, so he stands Menashe at Yaakov's right side, and as the Torah says, Sikalas Yadov ki Menashe Bechor. Yaakov Avinu switches his hands, and he puts his right hand on Ephraim, who's on his left, and his left hand on Menashe. And Yosef says, "No, my father, Loi Kenavi, don't do that. Menashe is the Bechor." And what does Yaakov say? Yedaiti b'ni yedaiti. There's so many questions, and so much ink is spilled on the brachas of Ephraim and Menashe. Why does Yaakov Avinu switch his hands? Why does Yosef question him? I want to address it. This is one approach. There's many approaches to understanding this whole parsha, but this approach, I think, complements the whole theme of what Vayechi is as well. The question is, if Yaakov wants to put his right hand on Ephraim, why doesn't he just switch their place? Why doesn't he stand Ephraim on his right side so he could bless them like this? Why does he switch his hands and not switch the place of the boys? That's question number one. Question number two is, it says, Pasuk, Sikalas Yadav, he switched his hands, Ki Menashe Bechor, because Menashe was the Bechor. But that's the reason, Menashe being the Bechor is the reason why he shouldn't switch his hands. Menashe is the Bechor, so he should put his right hand on the Bechor. The Bechor is Kodesh Mepaterechem, right? Kodesh Merechem. The Bechor is holy from the womb. The Bechor represents Kedusha, represents righteousness. So Ki Menashe Bechor is the reason why he shouldn't switch his hands. But it says, Sikalas Yadav Ki Menashe Bechor. He switched his hands because Menashe was the Bechor. The pasuk itself doesn't make any sense. And number three, why does when he says to his son, Yedaiti b'ni Yedaiti, I know my son, I know. There's a fascinating medrash that what is Yaakov saying? He knows what? He knows that Menashe is the Bechor. So says the Medrash, it's deeper than that. He's not just telling him, I know the birth order of your sons. Says the Medrash, he's telling him, Yedaiti b'ni Yedaiti. I know the story of Reuben and Bilhah. I know what happened with Reuben and Bilhah. I know what happened with Yehuda and Tamar. Another medrash says, I know what happened between you and your brothers, even though nobody told me explicitly. That's the Yadaiti B'ni Yadaiti, according to the medrash. But what do those issues have to do with what's going on right now, the brachas of Ephraim and Menashe? Yosef says, no, my father, you're switching your hands incorrectly. This one is the Bechor. And Yaakov says, I know about Reuben and Bilhah. I know about Yehuda and Tamar. I know what the brothers did to you. How is that an answer? What Yosef's saying? It's seemingly out of place. What is the Medrash trying to impart to us? And what does Yaakov say? I know this one will be great, but this one will be even greater. So I saw a beautiful explanation. A beautiful explanation. And a sefer that I quote often, Sorry Elofim by Ephraim Tversky, beautiful explanation. And he says as follows. He says, Yaakov Avinu knew the birth order. Each one of these brothers is not just a physical human being, but is symbolic of Klal Yisrael. Menashe, the Bechor, Kodesh Merechem, represents the tzaddik of the Jewish people. That's why he's the Bechor. He's the tzaddik, he's Kodesh, he's holy. And Ephraim represents the Bali Tshuva, those who have wandered away. As we see, many from Shevet Ephraim, Yeravam ben Nevat, who was a king of the Jewish people. He brought idolatry into the Beis HaMikdash, and many others who strayed from the path. So Menashe represents the tzaddikim, and Ephraim represents the Jews who strayed from the path. So this is the reason why Yaakov doesn't switch where they're standing. He agrees with Yosef. Menashe belongs on the right side. He's the Bechor. So he understands Menashe as the Bechor. He understands Menashe represents the tzaddikim, and therefore Menashe belongs standing on the right side, which is why he switches, but he wants, for some reason, which we'll speak about in a moment, to give his right hand. Right hand, what does right represent? Right represents chesed. Right represents love, ava, chesed. Left is gevura. Yaakov, for some reason, wants to give his extra love, his right hand, to Ephraim. But Menashe belongs on the right side. So therefore the Torah says, Sikalas Yadav ki Menashe Bechor. He had to switch his hands because Menashe belonged on the right side, because he was the Bechor. So that answers our first two questions. Why didn't he change their place? And why does it say he switched his hands? Because Menashe was the Bechor. Because he agreed Menashe should be standing in that place. So why did he want to give Ephraim the right hand? If Menashe is the tzaddik, and Yosef understands that as well, and Yaakov understands that as well, they both agree. So what does Yaakov say? Yes, this one will be great. Tzaddikim in the Jewish people will be great. But you know who's even greater than Tzaddikim? Bali Tshuva. B'makom shebali Tshuva aimdim afilu tzaddikim gemorim einu yechelim la'amid ba. In a place that a Baal Tshuva stands, even a great tzaddik cannot stand in that place. But how do we bring those who have wandered away from Yiddishkeit? How do we bring those who have strayed from Yiddishkeit? How do we bring them closer? And this is what Yaakov Avinu says to Yosef. I know the story of Reuven and Bilhah. I know what happened with Yehuda and Tamar. I know what happened with your brothers. All three strayed from the ideal behavior. But if I would have banished them, if I would have excommunicated them, if I would have treated them with gevura, they would have been lost forever. So my approach was to give them my right hand and to give them an extra dose of love. And that's why I want to put my right hand on Ephraim. Because to the end of time, I want the Bali Tshuva to feel the right hand of Yaakov Avinu. And that will bring them back, and that will bring them closer. Yaakov Avinu in that moment is giving us the recipe of how we deal with our children or our grandchildren who have left the path, who have chosen a less than ideal path. And this is what the Medrash is telling us. Yedaiti b'ni yedaiti. Yes, I know Menashe will be great, the tzaddikim will be great, but the Bali Tshuva who are brought back with love, with an extra dose of the right hand, with the Yamin Mekarevis and not the Smoil Deicha, not being pushed away by Gevura, by the left hand, but being brought close and embraced by the right hand. That will bring out their greatness. And so the message of the bracha of Ephraim and Menashe is how we keep the family unified, even when people are making choices that we don't agree with, that are less than ideal. We don't banish them. We don't yell at them. We don't push them away. We give them the right hand. That's the message of the bracha of Ephraim and Menashe. And so this is the entire theme of the whole parsha, from the brachas of Ephraim and Menashe to the story of Goren Atod, the thorn bushes, where Yosef puts his crown, and Yosef coming to peace with his family doesn't just affect his family, but has in fact a profound, powerful effect on the rest of the world. The strength of the Jewish people, when our families are unified, it profoundly affects the way the rest of the world looks at us. By Yosef placing his crown, surrendering his power, utilizing his power to unify the family, has a tremendous effect on the Malachim of Canaan and Yishmael. They themselves, instead of battling the Jewish people, put their crowns there as well, surrender to the Jewish people as well. This is the power of unifying our families. And then the story, Tachas Elokim. Am I Tachas Elokim? Am I under Hashem? No, I am Davuk to Hashem. This is the message. If I'm connected to Hashem, then I heal my family's wounds. Now, again, if someone in your family is engaged in tremendously negative behavior and is not bringing the family together and it doesn't seek reconciliation, okay, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about as a rabbi of 31 years, I can tell you the families that have been ripped apart over issues that don't deserve being ripped apart. A family doesn't deserve being ripped apart. Brothers who don't speak to each other over reasons they don't even remember anymore. And this is what Parshas Vayechi is teaching us. Those who have strayed from the path, give them a little extra dose of love. Give them Yaakov Avinu's right hand. We are symbolic of that right hand today. That's the message for us. Go and utilize the power that you have to unify your family. Being davuk to Hashem, connected to Hashem, not being tachas elokim, means unifying the family, bringing the family together. And that, when the family is unified, when our family units are strong, that is how we go from being individual families to becoming the nation of Klal Yisrael. And if there was ever a time in Jewish history, when we need strength to take on the rest of the world, it is now in our times. And so what an apropos parsha and an apropos message for the times that we live in. The strength of Klal Yisrael is equal and commensurate to the strength of our family units. This is the message of Parshas Vayechi. So Amir Tzashem, to every one of us, utilizing whatever strengths, powers, talents, abilities we have to bring our families together, to unify our families. May that itself unify Klal Yisrael, bring Klal Yisrael together. And just like it affected deeply the Malachi Canaan and the Malachi Yishmael, may our unity and our family unity today affect the world around us today, so that the entire world will see, as the Malachi Canaan and Malachi Yishmael saw, that it doesn't pay to fight Klal Yisrael. It pays to surrender your crowns to Klal Yisrael. And may Amir Hashem, may our unity and may our achdus and may our family unity bring ourselves together, our nations together, the world together, and so that we can ultimately experience the greatest achdus, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, b'imheira v'yimeinu, amen. Okay, let's do Tehillim 121 for on behalf of our hostages and our IDF and all of our Achinu b'nei Yisrael, Achlasinu b'nei Yisrael, wherever they may be. And we'll conclude this year. So everybody, please join me in. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the note. Thank you. In 121. Shir lamala esesainai harimi yayin yavoy Ezri mi marinai se shemayim v'aretz hayitin l'moraglecha yanim shem recha hine l'yanim leishan shemi Yisrael arinai shem recha l'netzilcha yad minecha Yema Mashemesh Leikach V'Yerech B'Layla. Adonai Yishmarcha Mikol Ra. Yishmer Es Nafshecha. Adonai Yishmer Tzeis V'Yacha Mi'ata V'Yad Eilam. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful week. And Amir Hashem, we'll see everybody next week. Thank you. Thank you.
That was so excellent.